tres clases de personas: los de arriba, los de abajo, los que caen.
A young man named Goreng awakens in a concrete jail cell where he is greeted by an older man named Trimagasi. Trimagasi informs him that they are on level 48 and in the pit. Trimagasi wonders what their food will be like when Goreng asks him to elaborate, but Trimagasi says it will be whatever the ones above left behind. Goreng look at a rectangular hole in the cell's bottom, seeing thousands of identical cells below theirs, but he sees the same thing when he looks up. Trimagasi replies that they eat when Goreng asks him how the pit works, and that 48 is not that bad of a rating, although it's either simple or difficult to do so depending on where you've been assigned. Goreng asks Trimagasi how many levels are below them, and Trimagasi says there aren't many, but that soon there will be less. Goreng calls out to the ones below them, but Trimagasi instructs him not to, and says that the ones above won't respond either. Trimagasi claims he has been in the pit for many months and that they will only remain at level 48 for exactly a month. Once it reaches the hole in the ceiling, a platform carrying food scraps descends down the platform, stopping as it approaches them. Trimagasi begins to eat hungrily. Goreng refuses to eat, dissatisfied with the prospect of having to eat food that 94 others have already eaten, but instead finds a perfectly intact apple and tucks it into his pocket. Wishing it would be later, Goreng points out that the room is getting hotter as the platform descends. Trimagasi claims that the room temperature will rise until they boil up, unless Goreng returns the apple he stole, and that the punishment for failing to keep any of the food is being burned or frozen to death. Goreng takes the apple back, and the air returns to normal. In exchange for Trimagasi's own story, Goreng offers to tell him why he is in the pit. Trimagasi asks him if Goreng voluntarily admitted himself to the pit, saying he intends on quitting smoking and that he brought a copy of Miguel de Cervantes' Don Quixote to read, since all prisoners are allowed to choose one personal item to bring into the prison with them. Goreng reveals that he agreed to remain in the prison for 6 months in exchange for an accredited diploma. Trimagasi admits to being a year in the salon, offended by the fact that he does not have a degree. Trimagasi tells his own tale the next day. He purchased a Samurai Max, a highly effective knife sharpener he had seen in a television commercial, before seeing an advertisement for the Samurai Plus, a self-sharpening knife. In his frustration at having wasted his money on the Samurai Max, he threw his TV out his window, crushing and killing a man who was passing by. Trimagasi seems to have no regrets for this act, considering that the man was an illegal immigrant and should not have been there in the first place. Trimagasi then admits that he doesn't know how many levels there are, but that there are certainly at least 132, having previously been on level 132 and claiming that no food reaches such low levels. But despite the platform's lack of food, Trimagasi claims he was still able to eat. Goreng wants to try to convince the ones above to ration the food, but Trimagasi says it's fruitless. Goreng then tries to pass the message to those below, but Trimagasi unzips his pants and urinates on them as Goreng watches in disgust. Goreng shows Trimagasi his copy of Don Quixote before asking what personal item Trimagasi chose. Trimagasi reveals that he brought a Samurai Plus. A body falls through the hole the next day, much to Goreng's dismay. While Trimagasi appears to be unfazed, Goreng yells at the other cells, asking why nobody is responding to the body. He is ignored. Goreng comes to the conclusion that Trimagasi had poisoned his cellmate. Just then, the platform approaches, carrying a bruised, bloodied Asian woman named Miharu. Trimagasi tells Goreng that he is worried for her, saying that Miharu goes to the pit every month in search of her son. Miharu kills her cellmate each month, so she has a greater chance of being paired with her son during the next month's cell rotation, and that the body that fell earlier was most likely Miharu's cellmate, having been pushed by her. On level 49, the platform descends and Miharu is assaulted by the prisoners, who scream for them to stop, but Goreng is ignored. Trimagasi advises him not to intervene because they'll only keep her for a few days. Miharu kills the 2 men in self-defense and returns to the platform, staring up at Trimagasi and Goreng with emotion before continuing her descent downward. Goreng begins reading Don Quixote to Trimagasi, in Chapter 1. Over the next month, the 2 men become close. Trimagasi asks Goreng one night if he believes in God. Goreng doesn't respond, but Trimagasi encourages Goreng to pray for them, saying that the room is being filled with gas that will put them to sleep and that they will be in a different cell when they wake up. Trimagasi explains that this is his 2nd month in the pit, that he doesn't think Goreng will survive much longer, and that he believes he deserves a degree for his time in the pit. Goreng asks him the same question Trimagasi had asked him earlier, and Trimagasi replies, "I believe this month When Goreng awakens, he is bound and gagged in his bed. Trimagasi appears and it is revealed that the two have been reassigned to level 171. Although Trimagasi argues that hunger will drive a person insane and that Goreng's meat is more desirable because he is younger than Trimagasi, he admits that he is reluctant to kill Goreng and wants to spare him at least a week. Screams can be heard from above, the screams of their fellow prisoners as they discover what levels they have been reassigned to. Several bodies pass through the hole. Goreng is omitted from the gag, who begins to beg for his life, but Trimagasi claims that their friendship was never meant to last. The platform arrives in their room, carrying nothing but empty plates, which Trimagasi throws in dissatisfaction. He explains that after 8 days, he will begin cutting strips of flesh from Goreng's skin, tending to the wounds each time so that Goreng does not bleed to death. Trimagasi informs Goreng on the 8th day that it is time to begin consuming his cellmate. Goreng has become too drained to stand and solemnly informs Trimagasi that he will only be responsible for his death, not the circumstances, nor the prisoners below him. Trimagasi informs Goreng on the 8th day that it is time to begin consuming his cellmate. Trimagasi successfully cuts a piece from Goreng's leg, only to be stopped by Miharu as she rides down the platform. Trimagasi is knocked out by Miharu with a wine bottle and uses his samurai plus to slit his throat before freeing Goreng, who fatally stabs him. Goreng passes out and awakes to the sight of Miharu cutting into Trimagasi's flesh, which she uses to feed herself and Goreng. Goreng asks her what her son's name is before continuing her descent. She refuses to respond. Goreng continues to sustain himself by using Trimagasi's body over the next month, resulting in a hallucination of Trimagasi. Trimagasi is the more civilized of the two, according to the apparition, who taunts him for the lack of respect and sympathy Goreng showed him. As Goreng is gassed at the end of the month, he dreams of a sexual encounter with Miharu. The next morning, he is awakened by a dachshund puppy and discovers that he is on level 33. Ramesses II is named after a woman named Imaugeri, his new cellmate. Imaugeri claims she would have never entered the pit without Ramesses, while Goreng scoffs and says bringing a dog into the pit was a bad move because he would inevitably end up dead. She does not respond, only telling him he can smoke if desired, and then recognizes her. Goreng is shown in a flashback scene before being interviewed by Imaugeri about any allergies or dietary restrictions he may have. During the interview, it was revealed that he was smoking. Imaugeri assured him that once he was accepted, he would not be allowed to smoke. She asked Goreng what is his favorite food. Goreng replied escargot à la bourguignon, snails with garlic butter. Though initially confused about why he was asked this, she said he would be added to the menu. When Imaugeri ominously explained that she was here to free him, she says she isn't, and that she came to the pit voluntarily. Goreng tells her that people die in the pit every day, which Imaugeri dismisses as a vertical self-management center. Goreng asks how many levels there are, to which she replies there are 200. Goreng claims that there isn't enough food for 200 people, but Imaugeri claims that if everyone ate only what they needed, the food would fall to its lowest level. The platform arrives in their cell. While Goreng eats, Imaugeri prepares 2 plates and then feeds Ramesses, explaining that she intends to ration her food by feeding her dog one day and herself the next. Goreng warns her that she could inadvertently cause the death of a child. Imaugeri is confused, saying that no children under the age of 16 are allowed into the pit. Imaugeri informs the people below them that she has prepared plates for them as the platform descends. She encourages them to only eat what's on the plate, then make similar plates for the ones below, and encourages them to do the same. The men on level 34 adamantly state that they have just arrived from level 88 and are practically starving. Goreng informs Imaugeri that if the prisoners were able to ration their food, the administration would know how to keep this from happening in the outside world. Imaugeri asks Goreng if he thinks everything the administration does is wrong, revealing that she has been working for them for 25 years. Goreng retorts that because of this, she enjoys the freedom to choose her own cellmate, rather than him. Imaugeri continues to try and reason with those above her, only to have her pleas dismissed each time. Goreng confronts the men on the 15th day of the month with angrily, threatening to defecate on their food if they do not follow Imaugeri's instructions. Imaugeri claims she wanted to please the people below rather than fearmonger them, but Goreng insists it was the only way. Imaugeri tries to persuade the people above, but Goreng insists they will not listen because he can't defecate upwards, so he has nothing to threaten them with. Miharu arrives on the platform the next day, severely wounded and barely conscious. The platform descends as they tend to her injuries, and Miharu speaks for the first time in the film, only stating it's cold. Goreng notices that the room temperature is being lowered in the hopes of freezing them to death. Imaugeri's dog Ramesses has kept a scrap of meat. He chases the dog for the scrap, and the temperature returns to normal. Miharu remains in their cell, and Goreng awakens in the middle of the night to a tense confrontation between the two women. He breaks up the fight, and as a frantic Imaugiri bursts into tears, he discovers that Miharu has killed Ramesses. Miharu rides the platform down once more the next day. Goreng informs Imaugiri of Miharu's search for her son. Imaugiri says she would not comprehend what Miharu is going through because Imaugiri does not have any children. Goreng watches as Miharu stabs the men in the cell below them, while Imaugiri recalls her meeting with Miharu 10 months earlier, remarking that Miharu came to the pit alone. Miharu is an actress, an orphan. She has no children, and her personal instrument is a ukulele, according to her. She makes racist comment about Miharu and she mocks Goreng for bringing a book before revealing to him that she has been bringing people to the pit for 8 years, claiming she was unaware of the horrific conditions. She takes off her shirt to reveal cancerous scars around her chest, claiming she battled the disease for 3 years and went to the pit to fix the system after finding that her diagnosis was terminal. The next day, the platform arrives with an intact plate of escargot à la bourguignon. Goreng is enthralled by this, but instead of ingesting it all himself, he puts 2 snails on each ration plate. When Goreng asks Imaugiri why she isn't eating, she says today was supposed to be Ramesses' Tuesday to eat. Goreng then tells her that since it is the last day of the month, she should have something, and they have no idea where they'll be tomorrow. Goreng wakes up in cell 202. Contradicting Imaugiri's earlier assertions that only 200 cells existed, and is shocked to discover that many more cells exist below them, and that Imaugiri has hanged herself. Goreng is hallucinated by Trimagasi and Imaugiri, telling him to eat her dead body. He refuses, sustaining himself by eating Don Quixote pages instead. He eventually gives up, slicing into Imaugiri with the samurai plus that Trimagasi had left behind. The next morning, Goreng awakens and finds Miharu sleeping in the bed next to him. Goreng wakes up screaming, revealing that this encounter to be a dream. She stabs him with the samurai plus, but he doesn't succeed. Goreng discovers that he is now in cell number 6 and that his new cellmate is a religious black man named Baharat, who has been trying to escape the pit for a while and is now fully confident he will be able to. Baharat tells the man and woman above them, a couple, that God spoke to him and told him to escape the pit, alluding to 2 compassionate individuals who aided him and were given eternal life for doing so. They agree to assist him. Baharat tosses his rope up to them, and the woman defecates on his face as he begins to climb. Baharat is enthralled by the stumbling cliffs and almost falls into the hole himself, but is saved by Goreng. Baharat does not eat despite the platform being almost full of food as it arrives in their cell. That night, an apparition of Trimagasi appears, who congratulates him on having only 1 month left before he is freed from the pit. Goreng persuades Baharat to ride the platform with him to persuade the other prisoners to ration their food, promising to make weapons to shield themselves from rogue or belligerent prisoners who attack them. Goreng estimates that there are about 250 levels. Baharat asks what they should do if they run out of food before reaching the lowest level. Goreng says they will simply ride the platform back up. Baharat is initially reluctant to do so, fearing to leave a level so close to the top, but the 2 men eventually agree to go down the next day. Despite being ridiculed by the couple on level 5, Goreng claims that once they reach level 51, they will only begin giving out the food, since the people on the first 50 levels can eat every day. Since he was on level 114 the previous month, before attempting to forcefully remove a piece of bread from the platform, the man makes racial remarks towards Baharat, and an angry Baharat bludgeons him to death. From that point forward, the 2 steadfastly defend the food from the prisoners on the first 50 levels. They meet Senior Brambang, a man in a wheelchair who seems to have a connection to Baharat on one of the levels. Brambang teaches them that civility and discussion are more effective than violence, and that if the administration doesn't recognize what they've done, their attempt to break the system will be fruitless. He then suggests that they leave a beautifully prepared plate of panna cotta intact and return it all the way back to level 0 as a message to the administration. Once they reach level 51, the 2 guard the panna cotta with ferocious care, keeping it untouched, and begin rationing food, threatening prisoners who take more than what they are given. Goreng explains that this was the cell in which Miharu woke up, requiring the men to accept that there are more than 250 levels. The platform does not stop at any of the following levels. Baharat argues that if there is no one living in a cell, the platform will not stop at that level. They hear Miharu's screams and discover that she is being assaulted by 2 other prisoners. Baharat and Goreng jump off the platform and violently confront the men. Miharu is fatally wounded. Goreng mourns over her body for a moment before being pulled away by Bharat as the platform is leaving. Though both men are wounded and severely traumatized, they continue their descent. With no food on the platform other than the still intact panna cotta, the platform eventually reaches level 333. And Bharat assumes that they have reached the last level and instructs Goreng to prepare himself for the ascension upwards. Goreng notices a little girl hiding under the couch. They get off the platform, but it goes downward before they can return. Goreng encourages Bharat, who is still holding the panna cotta, to toss it back onto the platform, but he refuses. Both men notice that the temperature in the room hasn't changed as the platform gets further away from them. The girl slowly crawls out of the bed, revealing that she has a striking similarity to Miharu. Goreng realizes that the son Miharu had been looking for is actually her daughter. They feed her the panna cotta before passing out. Goreng has yet another dream about Trimagasi, who praises him for his courage in squandering the food all the way back to level 6 and asks him if he wants to eat Bharat. Goreng hallucinates about Imaujiri, telling him that Ramesses II is the message, only to be awakened by Bharat, who tells him the girl is the message. He looks up to the platform to see the girl sleeping peacefully on top of it, affirming that she is the message before abruptly waking up, revealing that this encounter may have been a dream as well. He discovers that the true Bharat has died as a result of his injuries. Goreng wakes up and takes her to the platform. Once the platform has reached its lowest point, he is once more approached by the apparition of Trimagasi, who encourages him to get off the platform and leave with him. Goreng declines initially, saying he must ride the platform back up to level 0 before reversing. Trimagasi replies that this is unnecessary because he is not the message. Goreng responds that he is the sender, and Trimagasi says, the message requires no bearer. Goreng climbs off the platform and finds Trimagasi is correct, and the two walk off together as they watch the sleeping girl rise.